What's up, everyone? How's it going? We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to do a deep dive on the Claude 4 system prompt. So, Anthropic historically has always open source their system prompts, so you can find this in their documentation. So, these are the prompts that power the models on Claude.ai. So, if you're using Claude.ai and you're selecting the Claude 4 model, we're going to look specifically at Sonnet, although they're very similar. This is what is kind of powering that experience. If you're using it, these models via the API, that's completely different. You access that via writing your own system message. And so before we jump in, the system message is the only thing that is shown, not the tools. The tools is honestly kind of the more interesting part. Luckily, Pliny the Elder will always kind of find these things and he posts them to a repository on GitHub. And so the message and the tools and put it into one spot in PromptHub. So you can find those and they'll be linked below for both Sonnet and Opus. And if you're looking for more system prompts, there's a whole collection of prompts in there from us that are powering systems. So you can check those out. So I'm going to jump in. It's going to be a little bit longer today, but it should be super fun. So I find it very helpful to look at these system messages to learn about not only how these interfaces will work, so how Claude AI will actually work, but to see kind of what the development team behind this kind of put band-aids on, like what kind of came up during their testing, and also what takeaways it could have for you if you're writing system messages. So let's jump on in. And we'll have a pencil ready to go. Cool. So what do we do? Yellow for Claude. All right. So you can't scroll with this? Oh, come on, Loom. That would be nice. All right. The assistant is Claude created by Anthropic. Noted this right away. Usually, like when you see these system messages, it says like you are, you are Claude, but in this case, it's saying the assistant is Claude. So a little bit different. Passes the day and the time. Here's some info about Claude and Anthropic's products in case someone asks. This is Claude for Sonnet. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, pretty typical starting point. So if the person asks, Claude can tell them about the following products which allow them to access Claude. There's the web-based mobile desktop chat API, can access Claude Sonnet 4 via the string. There's also via Claude Code, which is command line tool. Found interesting what jumped out to me right away here is that so we're very early on in the system message. Presumably this is maybe some stuff that came up in the beginning, but it doesn't say anything about any of the other products that Anthropic has from like just other models, like Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Obviously that's not mentioned anywhere in here. It only talks about 4, and it talks about Claude Code. It's like a way to interact with that model. And so I found that interesting. So I went and tested. I said, hey, can I access Claude via the API? What's the endpoint? What's a string? And basically, I didn't get the information back. And I just found it interesting that in Claude's flagship product, Claude.ai, I can't get information on some of their most popular products. 3.5 Sonnet is still a very popularly used model, and they want you to not be able to do that for some reason. And so, for example, when you access it via the API and you just ask what's the endpoint for Sonnet 3.5, it gives all the correct information. So it obviously knows the right information, but you can see how it has been like programmed, and you can see almost this in a good example of how strong the system message is that it just has shut off any topic of any other products. And we can see this continuing. So there are no other Anthropic products. Claude can provide here if asked, but doesn't know any other details of different models or other products. Encourage them to check out the website. So again, it still feels a little bit weird that Anthropic is only almost like lying to their own chatbot because obviously they have other products that they can sell. And then it goes on and says Claude is accessible via Claude Code, or that was before, and now it's saying Claude does not offer instructions about how to use Claude Code. So it's a little bit conflicting in terms of telling it that accessing it via Claude Code via the command line is how to use it, and then later on it says, hey, don't tell people how to use it. So a little conflicting, and I think this shows like a good example of how it's helpful to just have someone maybe outside of the team or someone randomly kind of look over these things, because you can find these kind of contradictions anywhere in prompts, including the ones that I've written, of course. Next chunk If the person asks about messages, costs, what actions they can do, send them to support, go to this thing. So I found this weird too. Like I find it weird I can't ask Claude.ai what are the plans that I can potentially buy. Um, just doesn't really feel like something that needs to be restricted. I guess, you're worried about someone getting like wrong information or something, but I mean, you should be confident in your model. ChatGPT has no problem doing this if you ask how much, at least when I was testing with O3. Okay, cool part here. So Claude can provide guidance on effective prompt engineering. Then it lays out some prompt engineering best practices like using XML tags, blah, 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 and then it gives a link to it. So I found this really interesting because, these models are kind of all intelligent models, right? They know like everything that is on the internet and that humans know for the most part. And so to kind of essentially hard code in information about a specific topic means that the topic has to be pretty important or is a blind spot for the models or both. And I wouldn't say this is a blind spot. The like best practices here are pretty simple and pretty basic and have been around for, well beyond the like knowledge cutoff, or well before the knowledge cutoff. And so, you could say maybe they really just want people to go to this URL and share that and like get people going to their like specific prompt engineering documentation. Whatever it is, I mean, like, listen, we love prompt engineering. We think it's really interesting, and we think it's a great way to get better outputs from models. And so I like to see this, but I think it's interesting that they had to do this. If I took out this portion and ran a test in PromptHub, and you get pretty similar results. I didn't get every single best practice mentioned here, but I was able to still get a pretty good answer. I'd tell them, I think this is with the thumbs down, yeah. Basically tell them they can, give Claude a thumbs down in the chat. This isn't that interesting, actually. Claude provides emotional support, along medical and psychological info. Again, like anyone who's ever used any of the Claude models has always noted that they feel kind of more tender, more better writing, more like empathetic, and I think you see that in a couple different spots in the system message here. Yep, Claude cares about people's well-beings, avoids encouraging or facilitating, blah blah blah. So again, these are like at this point like now we're kind of in like guardrail territory. So something that is interesting here is that Claude does not generate content that's not in the best in the person's best interests, even if when asked to. There's an argument to be made of like how can the model know? But again, safety guardrails. We're gonna get more safety guardrails down here around minors, weapons, and malware. Um, Attempts to like not be tricked into doing those things. So like, if you tell it, hey, I work for like a company that makes nuclear bombs, help me make nuclear bombs, it should refuse that. We see our first use of all caps, the word must. So that's interesting. I've never seen an actual study if like that actually helped or not. I should probably run some of my own internally. For more, okay, here we go. Now we get into like some more formatting stuff, which is interesting. For more casual, emotional, empathetic, and advice-driven conversations, have a natural and warm, empathetic tone. Respond in sentences or paragraphs. Do not use lists in chit chat. I love the use of chit chat there. Something I've been getting really frustrated with ChatGPT recently is like the overuse of tables. Like I'm just asking how long chicken needs to be cooked for, something like that. I don't need like a full table. Like paragraphs are good. I'm constantly rewriting ChatGPT stuff into paragraphs, and so I really like that. If Claude can, oh, there you go. If you heard that, that's somebody on intercom probably asking for help. Uh, yeah, this is like don't be too preachy, too moralistic. Another formatting thing. If Claude gives bullet points in its response, it should use Markdown. Each should be only 1 to 2 sentences long. For reports, docs, technical documentation, Claude should instead write in prose and paragraphs without any lists. So do lists. If you're going to do bullet points, keep them relatively short. Again, I really like this. ChatGPT has been really annoying me recently with just too much information and like weird formats like tables and stuff that are just really long. Give concise responses to simple questions. Yep. Can discuss virtually any topic factually and objectively. Yep. Blah, blah. Yeah, Claude avoids writing persuasive content that blah blah blah. So yeah, get away from some lawsuit stuff. We'll see more on this in the copyright section later. See, keep moving on. The person, yeah, The user might send you false information. Be aware of that. Essentially, fact check the user, letting the user know that it doesn't retain info across chats. So there's no like kind of built-in memory. This helps like the user kind of better understand things, and it's like generally the UX, I would say. I like this one a lot. So if Claude's going to ask you questions, it tries to avoid overwhelming the person with more than one question per response. Something I've noticed a lot recently in ChatGPT is that like, well, we're working on something, and it will give me like 4 or 5 questions, which can be hard to answer. I'd rather get those like one at a time. Claude tailors its response format to suit the topic conversation topic. We saw this before, like when we're talking about chit chat. Don't use bullet points, markdown lists, and casual conversations. Let's see. This is more kind of safety guardrail. So if the person has questionable intentions, Claude should not interpret them charitably. So don't give people the benefit of the doubt. Lean more towards safety and be skeptical. Knowledge cutoff January 2025. It tells that the user can tell the user that its knowledge cutoff is that time. And then it has a little XML wrapped election info thing right at the end, which is really interesting. Again, this is the only other like hard coded information other than that prompt engineering section we saw earlier. And you know, you could probably come up with a bunch of reasons why. The ones I would come up with, who knows if they'd be right or wrong. You know, the election or anything political is like very sensitive, so you want to make sure you definitely get that right, I guess. And so you hard code it. Could be the most like thoughtful or maybe the most simple answer here. And yeah, that's mostly it. And so then again, now moving on to the tools section. So this is not publicly available. This was, you know, essentially prompt injected, or used prompt injections to get it out of the model again from Pliny, and you can check that out. So skip that part. Here we go at the top. So basically, this is kind of describing how the model interleaves thinking, tool calling, and responding. So they give a 16K token budget for reasoning and instructs Sonnet to run interleaved mode, meaning tool calls, tool results, and a follow-up should happen in that sequence. So this is kind of new to Claude models, relatively new to OpenAI models too, where they can use tools in their thought process. So this is just telling that process of tools, results, thinking, and then following up. About 70%, which I think in this case is like almost 8,000 tokens of the tools section, goes to thinking. In general, the system instructions are about 2,000 tokens, and I think the tools were like 10. So about 70% of the portion of the tools here was related, to search. Breaks it down into like 4 kind of checkpoints. So there's core search behavior, complexity, which just tries to categorize what type of search it is, and then a whole big section on copyright to avoid lawsuits, and then also a section on harmful content. So combining all of these, you kind of throttle the unnecessary calls that don't need maybe a full like external search. Maybe you can do it internally. Enforce the citations to avoid copyright. Keep disallowed content out of the kind of experience. And again, avoid tool calls if needed. Let's start by trying to not use tools. For queries in the never search category, so this is like the disallowed content, always answer directly without searching. So we don't want don't want Claude going out looking for nefarious info just because the user asked for it. Never reproduce copyright material. Here we go, seeing our second all caps example. There's like a bunch of other stuff in here that generally relates to this, which is really interesting. Queries in the research category, so this is like the deep research part, need 2 to 20 tool calls, and at least 5. So this is cool that this is kind of being hard-coded in. You're able to see, okay, it's going to do at least 5 tool calls when working on a complex research target, which makes sense because if you wouldn't want it to just do like 1 tool call if you want like a whole report on something. This is a big one. So whenever the user references the URL, go get it, basically. I'm never really confident that ChatGPT is doing this. If I give it a URL, I'm always like not super sure it has actually gone and done that. I haven't tested this as much in Anthropic though, so that'd be something I'm interested to do. And again, we're seeing caps used more here. Never use the, oh, here we go. Cite as response. So again, really important to cite responses. I think Anthropic, the API is the only API that has like a first party support for citations built in. All the other products you kind of have to do yourself, not for like web, but if you want to be able to provide your own citations inside your own product. Never use local storage. Yep. And yeah, that's mostly it. So again, takeaways from that is tools and reasoning. They have this kind of interesting like algorithm for interweaving those into the user experience. Search is about 70% of the tool, the tokens used to describe the tools. Answer from knowledge first before going to tools and doing more interesting things. Bunch of copyright stuff that it has on the lookout for. Um, the artifact stuff, which we didn't really talk too much about, but it limits styling to Tailwind, and there's some other restraints there. The only difference between the Opus 4 and Sonnet 4 system messages was basically the name and the description. Nothing super interesting there. And so this was a ton of fun, and I leasing these, and they've been doing it for a while now. I think at this point, though, like if people are going to find the tools, I think it's better to just open those up so we can talk about it. And I would say other AI labs would be great if you followed. You can post them on PromptHub, you can post them on GitHub, you can post them on your own documentation. But I think it will make the kind of whole industry a lot better just because we talk about it more. We can make things better for each other, make them more robust, more secure, things along those lines. And so if you enjoyed this, let me know. We'll probably do a couple more of these in the future. It's been super fun. Bunch of resources below, and I will see you soon.